This is Fuzzy Road to Health, and I'm Fuzzy D. So today we're going to be talking about my current state of health. Let's get started. So as of a few days ago, I've been on the carnivore diet for 23 weeks. My current weight is just under 225 pounds. I've lost a total weight of 215 pounds. Part of that was on keto before I started the carnivore diet. Since I've started the carnivore diet, I've lost about 66 pounds. So the first thing to mention is that my weight loss has slowed down significantly. I've been doing various things to keep kind of resetting my metabolism. I've come to realize that just because my actual weight loss on the scale has slowed down, it doesn't mean my body has slowed down reshaping. So every week when I put on my dress clothes to go to church, I notice that everything's getting a little looser every week. Now, I don't spend time measuring myself all the time, so I don't really have really tight metrics on that. The reason is, even though I could do measuring and, I would see some differences, I started at such a high weight. So my starting weight was 540 pounds way back when. I have so much hanging skin now that doing the measurements are in a way kind of meaningless because of all that extra skin hanging in the way. And I've got serious volumes of hanging skin after losing so much weight so fast. So one of the other things I've noticed as a benefit of the carnivore diet is my eyesight has been improving. So since I've been on the carnivore diet, especially the last 3 months or so, I've been noticing some improvements in my vision. It started initially with my longer vision with my glasses on. It used to be that, when I had the air fryer going on the stove and I was sitting on the couch in the living room, I could see that there was a light there on the air fryer, but I couldn't read it, of course. And all of a sudden one day I noticed that I looked up and I could actually read the numbers. So that was a kind of a shock to my system. And it's kind of slowly improved. And the other thing I've noticed is watching TV. I used to have my glasses way down like this, looking through the very top of them. I had to keep my head tilted down like that. And it really wasn't very enjoyable to watch TV sometimes. My neck would get sore and I'd have to keep shifting my position. I didn't even realize it was happening, but all of a sudden the other day I noticed that I was able to just sit with my head up normally, looking right through the middle of my glasses. It was nice and clean and clear. The biggest shock to my system actually happened a few days ago. I came in to work on the computer here and I sat down, I looked at the screen and everything was blurry and I couldn't figure out why. So I started checking a few things. I checked to make sure my glasses were clean. That wasn't it, and then other stuff that when I looked around, stuff that was farther away or closer in looked fine. So I started checking the drivers for my video card. Do I need to update the drivers? Has something gotten corrupted? I noticed I'd actually taken my glasses off after I was trying to mess around with the settings on the graphics card drivers. And when I took my glasses off to clean them, before I put them back on, I looked up at the screen and everything was crystal clear. I was like, what? That was definitely a shock to my system. And I found I can, a couple of times a day now, when I'm working on the computer, I can take my glasses off and work for, an hour to an hour and a half before things start getting blurry again. So I'm hoping that over time, as I push that, eventually I'll be able to dispense with my glasses entirely, at least for reading. I might still have to have glasses for close-up or distance or something. I don't know. Maybe one day they'll be completely gone. I've been completely amazed at how my body has been healing over the months of being on carnivore. Now, I've actually heard back from a few people when I just recorded a short video that I posted on Facebook telling people about that. And I got actually quite a few responses from other people on Carnivore that have had the exact same thing happen. Some people have been able to get rid of their glasses entirely. So that's pretty amazing. The other thing that I've noticed that's been slowly, very slowly healing, I have peripheral neuropathy. It's a result of one of my autoimmune diseases, which we'll get into in a minute. And if you don't know what peripheral neuropathy is, it causes severe numbness in the feet, so the nerves start going dead, except they still produce, or at least in my case, they produce like a burning pain. So anytime something touched my feet, I would just get this huge shock of burning pain like I had stepped in lava. It was just ridiculous. And I used to take all kinds of medications for that, and there were some real side effects with that medication. I've noticed that every once in a while I'll get a small patch on my foot that'll just start hurting like crazy for 2 or 3 days, and then the feeling's back. And pretty normal feeling at that. I remember the first time I felt something passing under my feet, and it was somebody's cat. Their tail brushed my feet, and I was just in shock. So it's something that's happening, extremely slowly. Nerves take a long time to recover if they're going to recover. It's probably going to be years before that completely heals. But the fact that it's healing at all is amazing. I mean, according to medical science, that can't really happen. So it's been kind of stunning. So let's talk a little bit about my autoimmune diseases. I've got 5 major autoimmune diseases and 3 less major. The main disease I have is myasthenia gravis, which causes severe muscle weakness. That and some of the issues I have with my back. I've got missing discs in my back. The combination of those two kept me bedridden for about 10 years. I've also got osteoarthritis, which seems to center in my hands and my wrists, my fingers, elbows, shoulders, and my hips. And I've got Sjogren's disease, which causes issues with the spine. And I've also got ankylosing spondylitis, which, to be honest, I just don't remember off the top of my head exactly what that is and how it affects me. It was just one of the things that they found when they were searching for the main cause of my illness when I was getting so sick. Back starting in about 2008, and it took them about 4 years to get a final diagnosis. And I've also got stenosis in my neck. Stenosis is basically spontaneous bone growth in the vertebrae. So it's created some weird growths and spurs and restrictions in my neck, which has made it difficult to move my neck in some directions. Like I can't tilt my head back very far, for instance. And as a matter of fact, back in my late 20s, when I started having problems of that kind with my neck, didn't know then what it was, but I had to stop riding mountain bike. And that was kind of the beginning of a slow decline in my health and gaining weight again. As a child, I used to carry extra weight, which I fought tooth and claw to get rid of that. And in my early 20s, I started doing some serious working out. I started running, started off walking and then jogging and then running. And, I wasn't a marathon runner or anything like that. I'd run a couple miles a day kind of a thing, and started working out. And then a couple of years later, when I moved to the Lower Mainland, I got into a gym and started pumping iron a little more hardcore. And I also started riding a mountain bike. And then somewhere in there, I think about a year into riding mountain bike, I was starting to average about 100 to 120 kilometers a week. And then I started driving tow truck. So, I was very physically active, both in my off time and my work time. And I got in really, really good shape. I never saw myself that way, though, self-esteem problems from my childhood. So I never really saw myself as, being big and buff and all that kind of stuff. But I definitely was. I had somewhere around 17 to 20% body fat and weighed about 275, 280 pounds. I'm 6'3" at the time. I was about 6'4", about 6'3.5". I originally was 6'4" until I had a motorcycle accident back in 1986. So I lost a little height there. And by the time that was all said and done, and then as my back deteriorated, now I'm about 6'3", maybe just a hair under. Once I had to stop riding mountain bike, and other kind of stuff started getting a little more painful. I started getting the joint pain, and I'd had some real problems with my knees as a kid. And I've suffered from chronic disease basically from birth. I was born with bronchitis. Spent many months in the first 5 years of my life in oxygen tents in the hospital. I had pneumonia several times, double pneumonia a couple of times, almost died 2 or 3 times by the time I was 6. And when I was about 4.5, I started getting ear infections all the time. And they couldn't figure out what kept causing them. And every time I got a bad ear infection, I lost a little hearing from scar tissue. I actually had a couple pinhole bursts in one eardrum and a pinhole burst in the other one. And by the time I was 6 years old, I lost like 85% of my hearing. Luckily, my mom did some research, and she started treating my ears with vitamin E oil drops after they solved the problem with why I was getting ear infections all the time, which turned out to be tonsils. They removed my tonsils. I guess an infection had been getting passed back and forth. So once the tonsils were gone, so were the ear infections. My mom started treating me 2 or 3 times a day with vitamin E oil drops in each ear, which got rid of most of the scar tissue. So over a period of about 18 months, I got most of my hearing back. So I'll fast forward to 2008 when I started getting sick again. It took them a few years to figure out what was going on. I won't get into all the details there. But they finally officially diagnosed me in 2012 with the major disease that was causing all the issues, which was myasthenia gravis. So at one point I could not walk. I couldn't even stand unassisted. I couldn't eat solid food. I was surviving just on liquid meal replacements and liquid vitamins. And it was very difficult to take any kind of medications, although even at that point I was on a lot of medication. So when they finally figured out what was wrong with me, my last visit to the doctor, when they figured it all out, I was there like 5 minutes. He ran this one test that was definitive, sent me immediately to the emergency ward in the hospital. And I was also having difficulty breathing. I couldn't talk. I could make noise, but no one but my wife could understand what I was trying to say. And I couldn't even make my hands function well enough to really write stuff down very well. So I was in pretty bad shape. If they hadn't figured it out and got a line of treatment going, I probably would have died within 3 or 4 months. So I was in pretty rough shape. Now they did a couple things at the hospital that temporarily reversed a lot of the symptoms, and they took me in for surgery. So a gland that's supposed to disappear after puberty didn't. It reactivated and actually broke itself apart into several pieces. So that's why I started deteriorating so quickly. So I got surgery to have all that removed, and once they got me on added some more medications to deal with some of the other things that had come up with this diagnosis. I was on like 19 prescriptions, and I'd already been bedridden for a couple of years at that point. And well, actually, I guess almost 4 years wheelchair and bedridden. So I remained bedridden for several more years. In 2018, I realized that medical science, at least Western medical science, wasn't going to help me much. So I started doing my own research, found some vitamins and some meditation techniques and self-hypnosis techniques that helped me deal with some of the pain. So the first thing I did was get off of all the different types of painkillers. I was on hydromorphone and Dilaudid and Lyrica, and I think there was one other. I don't remember what it is just now. So that was my first goal, was to get off of all the pain medications so that my brain could function a little better. And so I could start getting some memory back. My short-term memory was completely blown. With those things, I was able to actually start getting out and walking around and getting out of bed. Within a few months, I was able to kind of leave the wheelchair behind, except for when we had to go longer distances. So that was a big relief. My life started to change a bit then, and I started cutting out more and more medications as I could, finding vitamins or supplements to kind of replace the effect, because they had a whole lot less side effects. And matter of fact, in most cases, there were no side effects when I replaced the vitamins. I mean, half the medications I was on were for side effects of the other major medications. So it was kind of a vicious cycle. Luckily, I live in Canada, so we didn't have to pay for much of that. I was also on disability, so what I would have normally had to pay for, disability covered. If I was like down in the States, my medications at the peak would have run about $3,000 a month at least. So it was definitely not a good situation. In 2019, I knew the next thing I needed to do was start losing more weight. I'd lost some weight up to that point, but I needed to lose more, so I went on the keto diet. I was probably about 500 pounds when I went to keto, and I lost a lot of weight in a hurry. I got down by the end of, well, actually, I guess by the summer of 2019. I was off of almost all medications, and I was down to about 340 pounds. And then we had all that worldwide health nonsense going on, so couldn't go outside and got depressed, went off my keto diet, and went back up to 480 pounds. I won't get into what I did to lose weight again. Basically, I went back on keto for a while. But in December of 2022, my weight loss got stuck again. So I'd gotten down to 391 pounds, and I couldn't seem to budge past that. So I started doing more research, and in January, I ran across some videos from Dr. Barry. I had seen videos of his before, but they were for different issues. This time I found one talking about the carnivore diet and the fact that it helped autoimmune issues. So as of January 16th, I went on the carnivore diet, and the results happened very quickly for some things. I noticed the normal weakness from myasthenia gravis almost disappeared, other than the residual muscle weakness from atrophy of being in bed for 10 years, right? So, other than just a general lack of strength because of muscle atrophy, the actual active weakness caused by the disease was gone. And I noticed that there had been a power outage. I was forced to climb the stairs before I started carnivore, and took everything I had, one step at a time, both hands on the rail, all my strength to get up a couple flights of stairs. And then I couldn't get off the couch for like 3 hours. I was so weak. Then I'd been on carnivore about 2 weeks. We had another power outage. They were basically fixing what had broken the first time that they jury rigged, and they had to wait for stuff to come in. So they had a planned power outage. I had to walk the stairs again. This time I went up the stairs like a normal person, and granted, I was huffing and puffing at the top because I am sadly out of shape. 10 minutes on the couch and I was fine again. So that was my first big clue that major things were changing. By the way, also my weight loss restarted within 2 or 3 days. So the next thing I noticed was that the osteoarthritis pain and inflammation in my hands and wrists went away. One day I got up and I went to reach for something, and I noticed my hands were moving a lot better, and the pain was gone. It almost felt like it happened overnight, but I know it must have been kind of slowly getting better. And I think at that point I was about 3 weeks in. So when I'd been on the carnivore diet exactly a month, I had some blood tests a few days before, and I had a telephone appointment with my neurologist, and She was pretty blown away by the progress. I've surprised her a few times over the previous couple of years with the progress I'd been making with the vitamins and stuff. But this was at another level, and she was really amazed. And she took me off the last medication for my autoimmune disease, which was an immune suppressant. And that was February 16th that I went off that. And within 2 or 3 days, I was off my last other 2 medications. I was on blood pressure medication, and I was on Synthroid for my thyroid. And my blood pressure at its worst I had readings as high as 216 over 175, which was pretty insane. And medication got me down to about 140 over about 101, 102. But on the carnivore diet, I started getting down into a really normal range. And I've got my own blood pressure machine, so I was checking my blood pressure every day or two. And even after being off the medication for a month, I was still averaging about 120 over 70-ish, 72, somewhere in there. And it's been like that ever since. My A1C had gone from 6.1 down to 5.3. And I started treating my thyroid with some iodine drops, potassium iodide. It's a brand called Trophic. There should be a link down in the description if you think you need that. You can pick some up. Iodine is something that we actually all need for proper function of our metabolic system, but we'll get into that a little more later. So the other thing that I noticed as well as a benefit from carnivore is I had inflammation in other parts of my body that completely went away. I used to have a lot of swelling in my ankles and my feet, and that all went away. I think that took about 5 or 6 weeks, and I noticed that. One of the other things that happened early on was a change in my tinnitus. So I get 2 different levels of tinnitus. One is I get a constant whooshing in my ears. Sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's better. I still have that, although it's not as bad. But the worst part was I'd get this really high-pitched ringing in my ears that would go anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes, and it would happen several times a day, every day. And that completely disappeared within, I think, about 3 weeks or so. And I've only had one instance it came back for one time since. So it's been huge for me. I've also got Asperger's, something I found out fairly recently, but once I had done the testing and found out, it sure helped make a lot of things in my life make sense. So, one of the big things was OCD, and over the last few years, it had been getting steadily worse. The OCD can be a real issue sometimes, but I noticed that my Asperger's symptoms across the board have dropped by about 70 to 75%, depending on the day. The one kind of Asperger's side effect as well that has lessened. Don't know if this is necessarily a good thing, but one of the things with Asperger's is sometimes when we start concentrating on something, we get obsessed with it and go down a rabbit hole. So for doing research and that kind of thing, it can be very helpful. I know when I first started learning about the carnivore diet and started seeing some of the results, I really went down a rabbit hole. And I literally did hundreds of hours of research over a couple of months period, which has been a good thing because it's really helped me fine-tune the diet as I go. Now, I've also got bipolar, and I've taken medications for it in the past, and I didn't like what they did to me, so I tended to not use them. But as a result, I had some serious swings of my mood. I would go from a manic state, which is, very excited and enthusiastic and positive about everything. And then it would swing way down to deep depression. I'd get 2 or 3 days of mania and 2 or 3 weeks of deep depression, and then maybe a week or 2 of feeling more normal. Since switching to carnivore, 90% of that is gone. I get a tiny little bit Once in a while, I'll get, a little bubbly, but just, just a little bit, and it only lasts for a short time. And sometimes I'll get a little bit depressed, but I don't think any more than a normal person would get. And it usually doesn't last more than a day or two. So most of the time I'm pretty normal. So it's basically become a non-issue for me. Now, there's mental acuity as well. Now, once I got off all like the morphine and opiates and stuff, a lot of my mental acuity came back and a lot of my memory came back. But I still had a kind of a brain fog most of the time. And that has completely gone away now on the carnivore diet. It's been absolutely phenomenal. And my memory has gotten a lot better. It's still not what it used to be when I was in my teens and early 20s. Back then, I used to be able to read something and almost recite it back to you word for word. Not quite, but I was probably, about 90% eidetic memory. It's not really eidetic, but you know what I mean. It was like my memory was incredible. Now, not so much. My memory is kind of more normal for what most people have. Except for subjects that I'm really interested in. I seem to be able to remember those with almost the same level as I used to. So it's kind of become selective, I guess. So one of the things I want to talk about that isn't really a direct issue of whether being carnivore or not, but this is, because of all the weight loss and all this hanging skin I was talking about, I actually developed a fungal infection. The more weight I lost, especially with my stomach. I mean, my stomach hangs down several inches below my waist. And, it's just hanging there fairly flat. So it creates all this area where a fungal infection got started. I tried several prescriptions from the doctor and, they would work for a while and then they would stop working. And then it really started getting bad a little while ago. And because, of course, I was losing more and more weight. So I went back to the doctor, he took a look and he wrote me another prescription. And I think what had happened, and based on the research, I'm like 99% sure I'm right on this. I think it became resistant. So I started using the new prescription and it helped for about 2 days. And then it got worse than it ever had. I mean, it was so bad, I was bleeding everywhere. So, I was waking up and my underwear was soaked with blood. So it was getting just crazy. It was like the fungus was feeding on the medication. So I had to stop using it. So I figured, well, instead of trying to go back to the doctor for more prescription nonsense, I decided to do some research and I tried a few things. And what I've settled on that's working really well, actually, is it's a combination of pure apple cider vinegar mixed with an intensive skin therapy. So this is what I'm using. It's called Renew. So it's intensive skin therapy. It's by a company called Melaleuca. I'm not really supposed to identify them publicly because of their policy for their for if you're selling it. We used to sell it, but we don't anymore, so I can get away with it, I guess. But that's actually one of the best skin lotions I've ever seen. I use it as an aftershave. It works so well. Works far better than any aftershave lotion I've ever tried. I mix, basically I've got an old medicine container from a prescription. I take 3 tablespoons of the apple cider vinegar, which fills it about halfway, and then I fill it up just about to the top with the skin cream, mix it up really well, and then I apply that a couple times a day. And it took a few days to get rid of it. Actually, when I first started this, I was just using apple cider vinegar and water 50-50 to kill the main fungal infection. And then I switched to this method with mixing the two to help heal it, and it's starting to heal nicely. It's been about a week that it's been healing up fairly well. It's still got a long ways to go because it was really, really bad. But I know within about 3 days of starting to use the apple cider vinegar solution, the bleeding finally stopped. Like actual active flowing blood. When I cleaned it, I would still get a little blood on the cloth, but now that stopped a few days ago as well. So it's starting to heal up pretty well. So this is the thing that I've discovered, is that natural remedies tend to be far better than anything that you get that's pharmaceutical. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some times where medications for a short period of time are appropriate. And there are other treatments that you can get with Western medicine that are vital. I mean, you know, their surgical techniques and stuff are second to none. And, you know, one of the treatments they gave me when I was first diagnosed was something called plasmapheresis, or Plex. Basically what they do is they put a line in my neck. It went down to just above the heart. It was 2 lines in one. So it would pull the blood out, bring it into a machine, separate out the plasma, replace that with artificial plasma or donated plasma, usually a little bit of both, and then they would pump that back into just above my heart. So essentially I'd get a full oil change. They did that, I think 5 different sessions. Each session took about 4 hours. At the end of that, I was able to walk and talk and eat solid food. My breathing was pretty much back to normal. I still had to strengthen my diaphragm, but I could kind of breathe freely at that point. And that made me healthy enough for them to be able to, they waited about 3 months, and then they brought me back for another group of sessions, and then I went into surgery to have the thymus removed. So one of the other things that I do to help my immune system, because it was in such bad shape for so long and so many drugs suppressing it, I actually use a couple of different products. Like, there's a product I use almost daily. So it's basically a turkey tail mushroom tincture. It's a medicinal mushroom, and this helps kind of regulate my immune system. It kind of levels things out, because even though the carnivore diet is healing all of this stuff, if my body gets stressed by anything, whether it's the wrong food or whether it's environmental, if my body gets stressed, I start to get a little bit of the disease back, or some of the symptoms. So this helps to let me weather the storm when my body's getting stressed. Another big stressor for me is heat. If it starts getting too hot, my body gets pretty stressed, so that can be a real problem. So this helps level that out. And the other thing that I do, if I start getting sick, if I start getting a sore throat or lungs get congested, which is a big thing for me. I mean, I've had pneumonia 13 times, so I have to be very careful with that. So especially when I was on immunosuppressants, this is where I got into using this stuff initially. So it's a medicinal mushroom complex of 5 different strains of mushrooms. Now, I used to take a powdered form back before I started carnivore, not realizing that the fillers were actually contributing to it. So it's unfortunate that a lot of the commercial supplements we get nowadays have lots of fillers in them. So that's why you have to be so careful if you're going to use any type of supplement. So I'll just read off the actual ingredients that are in this tincture. So it's got chaga mushroom, cordyceps, reishi, criniere de leon. There's another name for it. I just don't remember what it is right now. And tramate, or tramite, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And it's in a tincture form. So the only other thing that's in there is a little bit of alcohol and water that they use to create the tincture. So if I start getting sick, I'll take 2 or 3 milliliters of that twice a day, and the next day it's completely gone. I mean, this stuff works fast and it's powerful. And the beauty of it is, if you do have autoimmune disease and you're on immunosuppressants, this won't cause an issue. Even after I went off the immunosuppressants, taking this supplement it does it in a normal way. It doesn't create that autoimmune response that is so damaging to us. So it's a fantastic product. So the 5 mushroom variety is this one. And then of course that's the turkey tail. Now, as I was talking about the apple cider vinegar, this is the apple cider vinegar that I use. Now, you don't have to use this, but it's the one that I found commercially available that is all natural. It's all natural. It's unfiltered. It's not pasteurized or anything. And it contains the mother, and it's all made from organically grown apples. So about the only thing you could get that would be better than this is if you make your own, which I'm actually going to try doing this fall. I'm going to try making my own. I go through it fairly quickly because I also use it for weight loss. So I take a solution of apple cider vinegar in water. So I do like a tablespoon in a glass of water. I take one in the morning, take one before bed. Depending on what time of the day I'm eating, I'll take some, 15 to 30 minutes before I eat. Although the last couple of months, I use it usually in the morning and then I eat. So I like to eat early in the morning now. There are some other health benefits to that, but we'll get into that a little later. So what else have I got going on? So in regards to my back issues, since I've now lost more than enough weight to qualify for possible back surgery, I got that in the works. But the first thing that they needed to do was book an MRI so they could get the latest pictures of my back. So I've actually got that coming up in about 2 weeks. So once I've got the results from that, I can go back to my family doctor and he can look at the results from that and then write me a referral. In Canada, you can't just decide you want to go see a particular doctor. You have to get referred because it's all paid for by our health system here. So there are definite advantages to that, but there are some disadvantages. And the other thing I've got going on is I'm taking a course to become a certified wellness coach. And then I will officially start operating as a wellness coach to try and generate a little income. But don't worry, I'm still going to provide the same level of information and recipes and that kind of thing on my YouTube channel. Well, if you enjoyed this video or found it useful, please make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're sure to catch our next videos coming out. We appreciate you being here today. We always enjoy having you. We'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.